Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1982 film Pieces, and there have been people who I've seen online calling this film Giallo. I don't believe it is Giallo. I've been on a journey, if you've been following my YouTube channel, and trying to figure out how to properly define Giallo films has been something I've worked on kind of recently. Shout out to Room 237 Reviews, who has been instrumental also in getting me to look a little bit harder at that. So that person does Giallo reviews, by the way, so you can check their channel out. Yeah, so one of the quintessential things, it has to be an Italian film. So kind of much like the Crimi films that were always German that inspired Giallo films. Giallo films have to be Italian, basically. Pieces is not Italian. There are a lot of Giallo-esque elements to Pieces, so I could see where people would believe it to be Giallo, and I get it. That's fine. So I will end up putting this in my playlist of Giallo and Giallo-esque films, because I do believe that people who like Giallo would probably like this because of some of those commonalities. But obviously the most glaring commonality being the appearance and how the appearance of the killer and how the killer operates. So just saying. Anyway, directed by Juan Piquer Simon, who also did films such as Mystery on Monster Island, Slugs, and Cthulhu Mansion. Written by Simon as well as Dick Randall. Now, Dick Randall wrote scripts for The Mad Butcher, Lady Frankenstein, The Cannibal Man, The Erotic Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. That's a very interesting title. And The French Sex Murders, which is a Giallo film that I've seen. It's back here in my forgotten Gialli from Severin. So very nice. Apparently the killer's look was based on the comic book character The Shadow, supposedly, allegedly, not based on Giallo killers, but based on The Shadow. I don't know if that's true or not. It's something I came across, so that's why I said it's supposedly. I don't know. I find that hard to believe. I think that there was probably a lot of inspiration taken from Giallo films for this film, and it's just so glaring with the way the killer looks. But making that comparison with The Shadow, like, I can kind of understand it, but I'm not fully buying it. Apparently, actual animal parts and animal blood were used for the gore scenes, which is probably why they look as good as they do. This is actually something that was very much popularized by George A. Romero and the people who worked with him, like Tom Savini. Yeah, it was very effective. I mean, what's better looking for gore than the real thing, in essence? And it's used quite well in this, and that's one of the greatest things is the splatter, the gore, the brutality in this film is very good. It's very well done if that's something that you're looking for. The film was shot in Madrid, Spain, apparently, with some stock footage that was used from one of Simon's films called Supersonic Man, which used some additional locations. I think, like, the college ones. I think it's supposed to be set, like, in Boston area, but, yeah, it's not actually shot there. It's all Madrid, really. There was interest in a sequel, apparently, but it ended up fizzling out because Simone had kind of moved on to other projects at that point. I'm kind of interested to know what would have happened from there. I kind of had a feeling that the character of Kendall may have been turned into a killer like the Dean himself. That's kind of my supposition as the sequel there, especially with the way that the film ends. But I'll talk more about that towards the end. This is apparently the last little bit before I get in the actual film events. This is apparently Eli Roth's favorite slasher film, which I believe would probably be the most correct genre definition of the film is slasher. It is a good one, too. I did enjoy it. I think the first time I watched it was with Joe Bob Briggs, his original marathon that he did on Shudder for The Last Drive-In. And I remember being like, wow, this is something. And I didn't like it as much as I did on additional viewings. So my opinion of it has definitely gone up over time. I think this is definitely one of those films where you kind of, when you see more of what's going on with additional views, your appreciation definitely goes up. So obviously the beginning is showing the origin of who will end up being revealed at the end as the killer, the Dean, and It's a good introduction. It's kind of that moment of like, this is where everything went wrong. This is the moment that this individual snapped. Now that said, there's obviously 40 years that go past before, supposedly, or from what we're seeing, the snap happens again, and we see that in the sense of the woman running into that giant mirror, which was then kind of this catalyst that the dean saw, going back to his childhood, reminding him of that moment where he was doing that nudie puzzle and his mom busted in and went crazy and smashed the mirror, and it informed his entire life, as for the purpose of this film, at least. So that was good. I do like that they kind of lay that origin down in the beginning. You obviously don't know who that is as a youngster, but you get the idea of what's going on there and what caused this, and then that catalyst moment. The death is funny because it looks bad, but the severed head reveal is actually really good. The kid doing the axe on his mom, like that's not shot great. Like, you see it kind of like coming down, and it's very fakey looking, the overly acted, but there's plenty of good gore. But the head reveal, when the officers come in and they're looking around, they open that closet and there's just like the head sitting on, I think it's like a small, like kind of a low dresser. Nice. I like that part. 40 years later, the killer pulling out the mementos of the murder and handling them with such care and adoration shows a return to that moment. This is kind of the idea that the person who is the killer has some sort of connection to this. They're moving it around out of the box with care. It's like they're taking in the moment. They're reliving it in their head. And I do like that moment because it's showing you that this is going to happen again. There will be killing on the way, because here we go again. The large broken mirror scene is the catalyst to start the killing urge again, which is shown by the puzzle being put together right after that scene happens. So take note of that. You're seeing the catalyst, and then they're giving you the idea that this is the catalyst, because then the puzzle comes out. The puzzle's being worked on again, going back to that childhood of when that nudie puzzle was being worked on originally. Now, this time, obviously, it's covered in blood. So, we're going to kill again. The chainsaw decapitation is pretty great. I do really love that. I already said that the gore and brutality is really good in this, but that is a particularly good one. That one and the arm, when the arm gets chainsawed off in the elevator, those are probably my two best kill scenes. Quite well done. Professor Brown is obviously a red herring, as he is in the anatomy department, as they say. I think he ends up becoming probably the most plausible red herring for people, because the way they go after Willard as being a red herring is just way too strong for people to really believe it if they're at all skeptical going into the film, especially people like myself who watch a lot of films with twists like that, which is something Giallo did a lot. But yeah, Willard, they went too hard at. Brown, I think, was just enough, in my opinion. And that it's these kind of small introductions of like, oh, he just happens to be around after a body's found, and oh, he's the head of the anatomy department, and he talks a little bit about anatomy, things like that. Willard is a very heavy-handed red herring with his demeanor and how much he loves his chainsaw. I mean, that's the introduction of his character, is him using the chainsaw after someone just got their head chainsawed off. And the way he's touching and taking care of that chainsaw is almost demented in the way that it looks. So it just seems like they're trying way too hard to be like, look, this is the killer, this is the killer. I guess if people think it might be a straightforward horror film, then people could fall into that trap. But most people probably would not. They'd be like, oh, they're pointing way too hard at this guy way too early for it to actually be the case. This film uses a misdirection strategy, like a lot of films, where they show the killer and then they cut in a scene with one of the red herrings. Yes, a lot of the times they'll show that a kill had happened or a killer's going after someone or around someone, and then they'll cut to like Willard or they'll cut to Professor Brown to kind of get it into people's heads that, oh, maybe they were just doing this and they just changed and now they're trying to act normal. So that was done numerous times. It's done in film a lot too, to kind of like embed it into the audience's mind that, oh, it's maybe this person. The pool skimmer scene makes me laugh because those things are not that strong. When this pool skimmer net goes over the woman's head and she gets pulled to the side and pulled up and then killed, it's just ridiculous because those things are not strong like that. Not only that, but she also could kind of get out of it easily. But for information about that, that leads me to another thing. I would highly recommend you check out the YouTube channel of Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete, because he literally has videos where he breaks down how likely or unlikely someone would be to get out of one of these kill scenes. And I believe he actually has a video for Pieces, so it would be a really good companion video to go along with my review. So Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete, check out his Pieces video. It's called Nails in the Coffin, and you'll see his rating system and how that works. He talks about it on each video, and they're fun. They're good videos. Willard finding the bloody chainsaw is probably going too far to continue to fool the audience with him as the killer. Yeah, it just goes back to the thing of me saying they were just going too hard on the Willard thing. I think they probably should have brought it back a little bit and he would have been more believable. You know, show him with the chainsaw in the beginning, but not acting overly excited about having the chainsaw. You know, make it a little more of a casual thing with him. And I think he would have been more believable, but it is what it is. It's hard to believe the police don't become immediately suspicious of the dean when they find that the second note that supposedly came from the woman who ended up being killed was from his office. He does explain it saying, well, I don't know how she got into my, I think he says he doesn't know why she would have used a piece of paper from his office, but there are so many moments where the police should have kind of had a suspicion, at least ask some more questions to the dean, and they just don't. They just kind of pass it along. They're just like, oh, well, this guy's the dean because he's this mild-mannered white guy in this dean position. There's no possible way he could be a suspect. So, not policing right. Or investigating, at least. Gotta love the heavy-breathing killer POV when it finally shows up. Obviously, Giallo was big into doing the whole not the heavy breathing, but the killer situation. The heavy breathing came in more with the slashers, let's be honest. I might be wrong, but at least I don't think I've seen any Giallo films that did the heavy breathing. I think that was kind of like that next step of the POV situation. I remember it a lot from the movie Madman that Joe Bob Briggs did on The Last Drive-In as well. It seems kind of reckless to rope Kendall in on the undercover investigation. I don't understand. It's a big plot hole that these police officers are just like, hey, you're a college student who seems semi-bright. Let's get you involved in this undercover operation. It makes no sense. But then they're like a big fan of him because there's even this moment later where Bracken is basically dressing down Holden verbally, where he's basically saying, we need Kendall on this, and insinuates that Kendall is better at Holden's job than Holden is. It's kind of ridiculous, and it's really overblown. So I think, I don't know, that's a weird thing that kind of bothers me about the film, but it's not a huge deal, because obviously I enjoy this film. The dean talks to Mary to find out if there's an undercover. Another undercover, that is. Obviously, the big problem with the police is that they let the dean know that they're going to be doing this undercover operation. They tell him there will be 2 people. He finally sees Mary, knows that she's one of the undercovers, and that's why he starts talking to her, asking her about, oh, who is there another undercover? Who's the other undercover? And then that's when she's like, oh, there is no other one. So as long as he can keep an eye on Mary, he's good to go. He knows that anyone else is just a victim for him, even though in the end he ends up going after Mary anyway, which I don't fully understand, and I'll kind of pose a question related to that later. Sorry, allergies at the moment. The arm cutting scene in the elevator reveals that the killer is a trusted person. At least for the victim, they're a trusted person. So it is one of those moments where, yes, it is a clue because everyone would trust the dean, but it's not a clue in the sense that when you're watching it for the first time, you know automatically that it would be someone in a position like that, because you could just make the assumption, oh, it's just someone that person happens to know. But no, it was someone that, all the students knew. You gotta love the Bracken questions Brown for being at the scene of the crime, but not the dean, because they both show up. Actually, the dean... Was it the dean that... No, the dean showed up second, and I think that's kind of why there was this little, Bracken was so distracted by the fact that Brown was there first. So Dean paced it pretty well and showed up after Brown so that Brown could basically take the heat in that situation. Plus, as I talked about before, the police just had this big blind spot for the dean. Which, by the way, that's how he's listed on IMDb, is just the dean. Gotta love this random Bruce Lee type character that ends up showing up in the film. I had read somewhere that was a situation, the martial arts professor, or teacher, as they said. I had heard that was thrown into there because Piquer had, Juan Piquer Simon, had been working on another film that had a Bruce Lee type character, so he just used this guy and put him in there for some reason. I don't know. It's really random, and it really plays as being unbelievably random, especially now. Gotta love the waterbed kill scene. Visually looks really cool. And also remember that there was some talk earlier by some students about how awesome waterbeds are. So the waterbed shows up. I think it's kind of like Chekhov's gun, where it's if you see the gun, it has to show up and be used later in the film. If you hear about a waterbed, it's going to show up later and be used in the film, and it is. But where was that location? I don't think that was someone's house. I think that was or apartment. That was just a building in the school. It's kind of weird, but shot really well. I liked all the times when they were showing the knife, the glints of light on the knife, the stabbing actually into the waterbed itself. That must have been a kind of hard scene to get, and I'm assuming they probably only did one take, or at least tried to only do one take, because cleaning all that up and then reshooting it would be tough. But I like that scene. The killer does show versatility by switching to a knife, by the way, because prior to that, you're just assuming, oh, it's just going to be chainsaw. But it's not. It shows versatility. It shows adaptability. It shows that it's not just a fixation on this chainsaw. It can be done in many ways. They make another effort to throw suspicion on Willard with the loudspeaker access talk. Yeah, that's the situation where the tennis situation is going on. The killer starts going after the one girl, but had turned on those loudspeakers with loud music. Willard comes out of the maintenance room for that and is questioned immediately about why are these speakers on, which are obviously on to cover up the sound of the murder and the chainsawing. So yeah, but it was just another one of those very heavy-handed things where they're trying to throw it at him again, because they're like, oh, here's the killer. Next scene, here's Willard coming out of a door. Yeah. Gotta love Mary repeatedly screaming the word bastard. That was funny. The way she does it. It's all about the way she does it. She's like, bastard, bastard. It's funny. Makes me laugh. There are a bunch of moments in this film that make me laugh. That is one of them for sure. Bracken telling Holden to take some uppers is pretty ridiculous. This goes along with that whole scene. It rolls into the whole scene where he's like, Kendall's going to come there and help out. And he's obviously better than you at your job. Obviously that wasn't in the film, but that's basically what he gets at. But he literally tells him to take some uppers because Holden was saying that he's, kind of run down, hasn't been sleeping well lately. He's dragging. He's like, well, take some uppers or something because we got to get this going. It's like, you just told him to take illegal drugs. That relationship between Bracken and Holden, not a good one. At least not for Holden. The scene of the killer putting heels on the pieced-together body, which you don't know that's what it is at the time. You just think it's a dead body hanging up, which is why they just shot it from, the legs down, which is smart. But that scene is showing the completion of that puzzle, in retrospect, when you're watching the film again. And that body is the mother in the killer's mind, basically. Because why are those specific shoes being taken and put on that body? Because those are the blood-stained shoes from the kill scene in the very beginning of the film. So it's this reliving of the initial murder for the dean. The reliving. I like how Bracken tells Holden that Kendall is basically better than him in his job. I already talked about that. The line about saccharin being put in the tea for Mary is a good way to hold off some suspicion when the dean is drugging the tea. So obviously he does 2 cups. And the first cup, you don't really think necessarily anything's going on because she asked to have saccharin added, and he pulls out like this dropper, which looks a little bit weird at first, but you're like, oh, maybe that's what the saccharin is in. He's just adding a sweetener for her that she asked for. But then with the second cup of tea, they focus on it so much, the camera does, and he looks so suspicious while he's doing it, that's when you start to kick in a little bit of suspicion, and you're like, hold on, there's definitely something off going on. I think the music also changes at that point, so having the auditory cue that you're supposed to now know something's amiss right here. It's pretty effective to show Mary unable to move on the floor while she watches Kendall struggling with the dean. After she's finally drugged and she can't move, then Kendall shows up and he's, struggling with the dean, fighting, and the dean has that knife. The fact that they show Mary on the ground watching, only able to watch because she can't move at all, like that's kind of fear-inducing. There's a lot of dread in that scene, and I think it plays really well, especially when you focus on what her point of view must be in that situation. I mean, just personally, like, think about being in that situation. Terrifying. I mean, you already knew you were in a vulnerable position. Then someone else shows up to try and help, and you feel maybe a little bit of hope. But then they're in a bad situation, and they're struggling with the killer, and you would probably like to be able to help out, because if it's 2 against 1, odds are much better, but you can't even move. All you can do is watch, and you may just be ending up seeing the other person's murder before you're murdered. Oh, terrifying. The pieced together body is a great jump scare, but the ball crushing is insanely random. I know that Joe Bob Briggs on The Last Drive-In, he had a whole theorization or had a whole theory about what that was supposed to symbolize. It was basically like the rage of all the female victims being taken out on the masculinity of, the testicles. But, and I could see where he gets that, but I'm not so sure that that's actually what was at play here. I think actually what that most likely was trying to be a setup for a sequel. That they were trying to have a traumatic moment for Kendall's character so that it could be used in another film to trigger something. Just saying, that's my theory on it. But maybe it was what Joe Bob said. You can believe him. And like I said, I could see where he would get that. That's fine. Quick question, though. Why was the dean trying to kill Mary if his puzzle was already done? Because you do get the idea, as the film is going on, that once the puzzle is done, it's done. Because in the opening scene, he kills his mother and then he finishes the puzzle. Then 40 years later, he has that, trigger of the broken mirror, and then the killing starts. And while the killing's happening and while he's harvesting these body parts, they're going to scenes of showing him putting the puzzle together. And the moments of him putting the puzzle together, if you rewatch it, they're showing you what parts he's collected. The portions of the puzzle that he completes are the parts that he has collected. So by the time he gets the puzzle finished, he has an entire body. And he does at the end. And that was the whole purpose. That shows the completion of his murder spree. So it doesn't make sense that he was trying to kill Mary unless he thought that Mary was onto him. But from the audience perspective, we know that she was not onto him. Because otherwise, why would she have even gone to meet with him? It doesn't make sense. So I feel like it doesn't really make sense that he would be trying to kill her because his murder spree had come to an end. At least the way that the story is told throughout the film and how he operates, he was done once that pieced together body was done. Just saying. The directing for this film's pretty solid. They did have some really cool camera movements in it, so good directing, good cinematography. The acting, not the greatest, but that adds to, a lot of the charm of it. I did dig the music for this. It's fun, upbeat music, and at other times adds to the nice dread of the film. A college is perfect place for the dean to kill, since it's hard to tie any one person to interactions with the victims. Yeah, if you really think about it, the fact that he was in that position made it very easy for him to avoid suspicion, even though the police were like extra bad at their jobs. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of smart. Now, it makes you kind of question, was he intentionally seeking that position to have that opportunity, or did it just occurred that it happened to be a good opportunity position once he was triggered again? You don't know. The dean put pieces of naked women together just like that puzzle in the beginning. That opening scene was the defining moment in his life. And I think once you see the end of the film and then you kind of look back on the other events, you realize that. So on a second viewing, it becomes way more clear that that is what shaped his life. That one moment with the puzzle, his mom busting in, going crazy, smashing the mirror, and then him snapping and killing her, that defined everything. So, yes. And that's why I also think that the testicle crushing with Kendall was kind of meant to be a setup for another film, because it's similar. This film gets at the idea that parents can have a negative impact on the relationships children have with the opposite sex later in life. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't apply as much today because there are people who are non-binary, asexual, all those types of things. But with all the gender roles and everything back during this time period, this kind of seemed like it was the point of the film, is that here is a woman, the dean's mother, causing him to cause a traumatic memory, and that would shape his relationship with the opposite sex as far as going out and killing. It evoked this huge rage because obviously he had a problem with his mother. That moment in the very beginning of the film, it doesn't seem like it's the only moment that she was ever mean to him, that she was ever verbally abusive. She had potentially been physically abusive, we don't know. But he snaps for a reason. He doesn't just snap out of nowhere. He snaps because you get the idea that this has been something that's been going on and on and on and on. So he had a terrible relationship with the primary female in his life prior, which was setting him up to have a hard time having a healthy relationship with females in the future. And so once he's reminded of that event with his mother, he starts to see all females basically as his mother in a sense, and starts killing them to cobble together this puzzle. It's a cool concept. It is a good concept for a film. I still enjoy this film, obviously. And out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give this a very solid 3.5-star rating. Would love to hear other people's thoughts on this film. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. Love it, hate it, in between. Let's talk. Also, like I said, go and check out your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete for his Nails in the Coffin video about Pieces, because it is a good companion piece to this where he's breaking down all the kill scenes. Because I talk about him a little bit, but I don't go into depth like he does. And also, it's really cool that he will actually kind of lay out the scenarios of they could have done this to get away. It was this difficult or not this difficult for the person to get away. So I do enjoy that. So check that one out. Do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you have already, you are amazing, and I love that. If you haven't, it is quick, painless, costs you no money, and literally is the way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done. Not making money doing this at this point, so really motivation is all I have. And so getting new subscribers is definitely motivating for me. Also comments. I love interacting with people with this stuff. So please do me that favor. Also hit the notification bell button if you do that, and that would be great, because if you can watch the videos when they come out relatively soon, it helps with getting extra views, getting more traction. So appreciate all of it. Regardless, I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.